All right, welcome. It takes me a while to get used to this saying this, but it is Fohrcast episode 2. This is really, though, the first episode since the first one was me just saying, hey, we changed our names. And I thought, what better way to kick off a whole new show than talking to Brittany Hennessy. Thank you for being here.
Hello, happy to be joining, albeit from very far away, time of the time.
And, I wanted to bring Brittany on because it's working out perfectly because we have been lucky enough to enlist your services, and you are going to be working with Fohr and helping to manage some of the community and education programs that we're running at Fohr.
Yeah, I'm super excited. We're gonna do some great work together.
We're gonna do it all. And for those of you who don't know Brittany, which I don't actually think that's anyone that is probably watching this, but I really feel like you wrote the kind of quintessential book for an influencer that is taking this seriously and wants to grow their following and understand how to run it as a business and all the stuff we talk about on what was formerly which Tim's just gonna have to keep beeping out because I'm gonna keep saying it, but what was formerly and what is now Fohrcast. I'm lazy. I just get on YouTube and talk about it once a week. You wrote a book about it.
Yeah, I think it stemmed from, I've been in the influencer industry for a long time. So I think I got into it. I was a blogger first. I had a very prominent blog, Shishi212, back in 2007 that would get, picked up by Eater and Grub Street and Down by the Hipster and Guess the Guess and Page 6. And so being at the beginning and seeing we're blogging, we're talking about things. And then I was an ambassador for Nivea and The Gap and Febka and Pop Chips. And there was no term for this. You definitely didn't get paid for it. Mm-hmm. You got free vodka and you were like, whoa, this is life. This is amazing. And then social media was just becoming a thing. And so I had this blog, I worked at a talent agency, and then different things started to come together. And I worked at Horizon Media as associate director of influencer marketing. And it was we're going to hire bloggers. We were hiring Viners to promote all our clients. And it was this is a real thing. And then I went to Hearst, which is obviously the creme de la creme of publishing, and then hiring influencers to work with brands and all the titles. And just every step of the way encountering influencers who had no idea what they were doing. Mm-hmm. And my initial thought was, I wish I could just give these guys a book. It's not how this works.
Yeah.
It's not how any of this works. Please read this. Make my job easier. Thank you. And then I actually went looking for a book, and I was like, oh, there's no book. And my husband, Alexander, was like, well, then you should write it. And I was like, I don't know about all that. He kept pushing it and saying who else? And I was like, it makes sense, because I was an influencer. I worked at an agency. I worked at a brand. I worked at a publisher. So I could see all of the different angles, and then working with beauty and fashion and travel and fitness, mm-hmm. and men titles, women titles. Some of the titles at Hearst are for old ladies. Some of them are for teenagers. So just being able to see across all these different categories, age group, genders, here are the things that are the same everywhere. Mm-hmm. And so then I said, oh, there is actually enough substance to write a full book here. Getting people to buy a book, publishing, was a totally different story. But I knew that we had something, and influencers were looking for guidance, and who was going to help them.
Yeah, you. Apparently.
I volunteer to distribute.
And I think one of the things that is so fun and difficult about this space is how quickly it changes, right? And yes. I wonder what, since the book came out, which was a few years ago, right?
2 years, I think next week.
Yeah. So 2 years ago, what do you think the big changes has been? Because I read the book. I know a lot of it, holds up. It's like, hasn't changed.
Right.
But is there anything in it that you feel like, oh yeah, that's like very different now than what it was like 2 years ago?
I think just the way influencers can communicate with their audiences, how they can learn so much more about them. Because while I was writing the book, I think stories had just been announced.
Mm-hmm.
This was not even the thing yet. It was kind of like, this cool thing is coming, and they'll be like, these videos.
Right.
And I think that really helped, because if you were a YouTuber, YouTubers talk to their audience. They've got like these shows, some of them have theme songs, you're like tuning in, and you really have this strong connection with them. But if you were a blogger, or not wisely just an Instagrammer, there wasn't really a way for your audience to hear your voice, to laugh with you, for you to get a little silly, because everything was so focused on the perfection of the grid.
Yeah.
And it was like your feed had to be perfect and curated, and the aesthetic and the colors. And I think you really got like, everything started to look the same. That's where we were at. And then with stories, influencers were like, oh, well, I'm just in my kitchen cooking. Even though I'm a beauty influencer, this is me making whatever dish, and realizing like, oh wait, my audience cares about more than beauty tutorials. They like me as a person, and want to see me go grocery shopping, paint my living room, declutter a closet.
Yeah.
And so I think influencers really got to step into like, oh, I'm a personality that has an audience and a community I can connect with, and not just have to churn out like this editorial content that is really for brands and not necessarily for your community. It's like, my photos are so pretty, someone please hire me. As opposed to, here's like real raw me. And then seeing how well stories work, you started to see that kind of raw content infiltrate the grid.
Yeah.
And now people have like a mix. They've got like a photo they took like on their iPhone that's a selfie, coupled with something that's professionally shot and edited. So I think we've relaxed a lot, which I like, because how many times can you see someone in a Bora Bora swimming with the pigs? I mean, everyone has the same shot.
I mean, you would think you couldn't see it that often, but it keeps coming. It's like, it was like I think it was like 2 years ago, I was on a fucking tear about Positano. I was like, if I see another influencer go to Positano, I am going to personally, like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I need to stop seeing this.
But that's the power of influencers. You got like the wave. Like who was like, I need to go to Bali and swing on the swing? Nobody.
Yeah. Just
people who like were really like true backpackers, but then the influencers started going, and it's like, oh God, I have to go to Bali.
I gotta get that.
Then
photo.
they're going to Marrakesh, and it's like, oh my God, I have to go here, and like you've got to
get on that camel.
The balloon. Yeah, I need the balloon festival shot. I gotta go to South Africa and get like the giraffe coming through the window. It became like, bucket lists weren't places anymore. They were Instagram shots. Like I've got to get this set of shots, and so. But those places, they're making a ton of money off of influencers.
Oh,
not presently, but the influencers really dictate what is cool. Like Greece. We've all got to go to Greece now. August is Greece time. Because that's where the influencers are.
Think of the word influencer, right? You have to be influential. That probably means you have to have some unique viewpoint or knowledge, right? And so, like, if I think, oh, I follow this, I love clothes and men's suiting. And I follow some guys who know more about suits than I will ever know in my entire life. And so them diving deep into the minutia of these different stitches and stuff means I don't have to, right? Because like they say, hey, this thing's good. And I'm like, cool, great, that works. Then it becomes about your lifestyle. It becomes about, did you win the genetic lottery? And do you think we lose some of that substance, some of that focus on like a craft of like, I understand something about this space that most people don't?
Right. I think, that's the fork in the road. I think lots of people, when they become influencers, there are the influencers who are educational. And, I put myself in that camp, because every post, I feel like you should be smarter after having consumed my content than you were before you saw it. And some influencers are like that. They really are doing like deep dives into like, you know, this collection and the fabrics or these beauty products and like what the chemical makeup is, or, you know, even parenting, like here are my products that I use for X, Y, and Z. So you do have that. But, you know, then you have people who are just, they're pretty, you know, they're pretty and you just want to look at them. And it's essentially, I would say scrolling through your Instagram feed, you know, is essentially the same as reading a magazine. Sometimes there are articles to read and other times there are ads that are just pretty. And some influencers are ads, they're just beautiful. And you're like, ooh, what's that dress? What's that shirt? I want that. Let me go look it up. And then some influencers create content that you're like, oh, I'm going to stop and I'm going to read this and retain this information and save it or share it. Or, you know, with a magazine, you'd rip it out and hold that page. On Instagram, you'd bookmark it. So I think there's room for both. You know, no magazine is just all text and no magazine is just all ads, although sometimes, you know, one of those things are either thinning out or bulking up at any point in time. But you know, I think that's the beauty of it, is that there's room for anyone who, if the people will tolerate you, you can be in the space. And, you know, certain times you see like there's a push, like right now there is a request, I think, for substance because there's a lot of change and people are like, okay, well, and let me look at the influencers I know who have like a good home office setup or who can help me do workouts at home or who can help me teach bread. So bake bread. So I think we're at a point where people are in learning mode. So influencers who teach are actually having a bigger rise and more popularity. And the ones who are just really pretty, like nobody has time for that right now.
Right.
Just like, I can't look at another person whose life has not been completely wrecked by coronavirus. Like,
and that's,
you know.
that's the other side of it, is that like, you know, while like we very likely are in a recession, it's hard to know how sweeping the economic devastation will be over the coming years. But like when there are economic downturns, the logos come off of luxury products, you know, everything gets scaled back. And you know, you don't want to see someone who's doing a lot better than you, living a carefree life, because there is so much suffering, economic and physical, happening right now, that you're like, I think I said a while ago that it's just like, there's a less of an appetite for frivolity, you know, that like just, it just, you want, I think you said it perfectly. You just want something can I learn something? Can my life be a little better for reading this? I think there's value in being like, can I get a little escape? But the escape might be something funny instead of a person who is, you know, quarantining in their, you know, parents' mansion in the Bahamas or something, you know?
Right. Yeah. You know, it's kind of like, it's like the reverse of like reality TV. Plenty of people watch reality TV because they can go, oh, look, someone whose life is worse than mine. And so they feel better about it. That's the only reason why I think reality TV, the people they continually, like, where do they find the people to do some of these shows, you know? And then I think on Instagram, when you have the ability to do better, because, you know, you can put in more time at work or save some money, you're looking to Instagram to say, okay, what can I aspire to be? What are some things I can add to my wish list to buy or something like that? But I think now we're in a time where people are a little more conservative and it's like, well, I'm just trying to like hang in here. There are plenty of people who, you know, especially influencers, that this is boom time for them. More people are consuming content. People are home shopping. So like their affiliate revenue is going through the roof. So for some people, they're doing better than they've ever done. But you have to be, you know, cognizant of like, well, maybe your audience isn't. And so you've got to, you know, it's hard to be a creator because you've got to strike that balance between, you know, I don't want to be doomsday every time you come to my page, but at the same time, I don't want you to think I'm like out of touch and tone deaf. So, you know, there was a window where you didn't really see too much branded content between like coronavirus and then the social justice movement that's happening. You just couldn't do that or the backlash would be swift. But I think a while ago, I put out a story that was like, is it safe to post branded content? My feed says yes, because it was like, oh, look, here are all these ads. So I felt like people at least feel safe enough to start putting that kind of content back out there, but it still is very scaled back. You know, they're not in Bora Bora, they're in their backyard.
Yes.
Still nicer than your backyard.
Yes.
but,
yes.
but at least they're home and not on an exotic vacation.
And I think that the influencers that are posting that content, you know, you had to spend the time, you know, doing the listening, learning, you know, and like proving in a way that you could be a part of that kind of larger, much more important conversation before you could go back to posting, so, you know, to sponsored content. And yeah, it was wild. I mean, I think last week we had 180 sponsored posts go live on behalf of clients, which, you know, we've been sitting at like under 50 since March. So it really does feel like it just kind of has ticked over.
And people want some sense of normalcy. I think, you know, it was, okay, this won't last very long. Then it was, oh, this might last longer than we think. And now it's like, well, this is the new normal. And now we're back to, all right, well, if this is the new normal, let's get back to normal, you know? Right. And then it's like, all right, bring me the posts. I'm ready. I'm trying to sort this out. But people want to, you know, they want some normalcy back in their feed. Yeah. Your Instagram, you know, is a strange place because it usually manages to not get caught up in whatever's happening on other social media channels. I mean, Facebook is like always a war zone. Twitter, I don't even know what's happening there. Twitter is like post nuclear bomb every day. It's like you can't have a pleasant day on Twitter. Like it's gonna happen somewhere. Something's gonna go wrong.
It's a hell site.
Right, but Instagram, no matter what else was happening, managed to still be like a nice, friendly place where influencers could just post, the comments were sweet, and we could just get on with it. But the last few months have just been so turbulent that even Instagram is a sea of, you know, really realistic posts or, you know, people yelling or all sorts of things. And I'm just like, this is not why I'm on Instagram. That's why I'm on Facebook, but this is not why I'm on, you know, Instagram. So as an influencer, you want to do your part and not be tone deaf and be part of conversations. But at the end of the day, like, you create content per platform because that's what people expect to see on that platform. Yeah. And you can feel free to, like, you know, scream at the top of your lungs on Twitter because that's what that's for. That's not what Instagram is for. But Instagram is a happy place.
Yeah. But you know, you're giving advice to influencers every day, obviously. And I'm sure, you know, what are the questions that you're getting now that you probably weren't getting a couple, because like COVID had its own, you know, set of, you know, things that I think influencers had to watch out for, but it's pretty easy to navigate, you know, don't be an asshole, don't travel, wear a mask, and spread some, you know, information about how we can curb this. And maybe don't post so much sponsored content because a lot of people are suffering monetarily. But
so easy, and yet
the racial pandemic and the social justice movement, you know, and thinking about that much harder for brands, for influencers to navigate. I'm sure they're coming to you saying, what do I do?
Yeah, you know, it's difficult because for so many people, you can have very strong opinions on something, but it doesn't define your personal brand. And, you know, people have actually been angry at me for not saying more. And I'm like, listen, I bring diversity to whatever room I enter. I am diversity. So like, I'm bringing it. I don't have to do more work. You know, it's just so much, like, you have a basic responsibility to, like, be on the right side of history, which I think a lot of people have done a really good job doing. But that doesn't mean that all of a sudden, like, all of us have to be activists, you know? And also because social media is just, it's social media. It's not real life. And I think if anybody should know that, it's influencers and people who follow them. Like, you can do a lot on Instagram that has nothing to do with your real life, because as we learned, following these travel influencers, a lot of these fashion and beauty people, when they had to create content from their house, we're like, this is where you live? Really? You know, your mirror is not even that far from the wall. Your apartment must be really small. Then you know, you get to see people's, like, real life. And I think the same thing is happening, you know, with the social justice stuff. Like, I definitely spend more time writing letters and raising money than I do talking about it on Instagram. Like
Right.
that's not the best use of my time. You know, half the time we're in echo chambers anyway. So anybody who's listening to what I'm saying already agrees with me. So I'm not shouting at you. I'm not interested in fighting with other people just because I'm tired and I'm old. I don't know. Maybe if I was like 21, I could be screaming at people, but like, you know, I'm more interested in like doing the work. And I think, you know, a lot of people are interested in doing the work and less about talking about it on social media. Some people don't feel qualified to talk about it. And I think, you know, that's another thing. Like as influencers, you should never really feel like you have to speak on something you're not qualified to speak on. Now, treating other people like human beings, everyone's qualified to speak on that. Yes. You know, this is something you should know how to do. But in terms of like actionable steps to take, aside from like voting, plenty of people don't know what else to do, you know? So I don't expect you to turn, and I tell influencers this, like, I don't expect you to turn like your organization Instagram into like how we can fight racism. Like you don't even know about that. Like, you know, like I'm going to vote, I'm going to write some letters, I'm going to try and raise money for organizations that are fighting this fight. But like we have structures in place. As an influencer, probably the best thing you can do is amplify other people's voices, the people who are putting in this work. And you can do that through like stories, you can do Instagram lives and like pick an organization to raise money for. I did a pricing seminar and you could either pay $50 or you could donate money to the Bailout Project, which is trying to like, you know, all these people who are in prison because they can't afford bail, which is crazy, have not committed a crime, but just can't. And I was like, that's insane. Now, do I know how to dismantle that entire system? No. Like, I'm an author, I'm a mom, like I don't really have any background in that, but here's an organization doing that work. Well, I can get people to give them money so that they can go and do this work. And I think that's a perfectly acceptable avenue. And anybody who wants you to do more than that, people have limitations, you know, and being in this like line of work, social justice work is exhausting. Anyone who does that full time will tell you, like, it's depressing to just constantly be looking at what's wrong in the world. And influencers they're almost the opposite of that. They're almost like, well, here's what's right. You can organize your refrigerator so it looks beautiful. You can, you know, surround yourself with beautiful flowers and books and clothes. And influencers are like the positive beacon of what's happening. And so I think, you know, it's your responsibility to use your voice for good and shed light on issues, but you don't have to change your entire Instagram to now be an activist. If you're not an activist, you're not an activist. I did something and they called me an activist and I was like, do not insult real activists by calling me an activist. I'm someone who cares and has like passions and will like advocate for people, but like I'm not an activist. Like those people exist and their lives are very different. So it's hard. It's hard.
I think that, that's great advice. And I think that's why, you know, we've seen the like explosion of like, I don't know how else to say, but like illustrative Instagram carousels. You know, there's like all those illustrators who are kind of like doing the multiple slides on like, let me explain what institutional racism is. And they're like using illustrations. And then those are getting shared like crazy because I think people do feel like, I don't know how to talk about this, but I can share this thing that taught me a bit, helped me understand it, and hopefully it can help my audience understand it. You know?
Yes. And that's your job as a vessel. You know, you're supposed to transmit information to your audience, whether it's how they can help dismantle racism or like how they can pick the best sunscreen. Like you're, you know, not necessarily the expert on these things. And it's no different than like your regular content. Plenty of people are fitness enthusiasts. You're not a personal trainer, but you're like, this is what works for me. This is what I like. If it doesn't work for you, try something else, talk to your doctor, but like, this is what I think. And so much of what influencers do is like what they think personally. And the really good ones draw on expert advice to help them not sound ridiculous. And, you know, coronavirus, same thing. Like you're not a doctor. You're not a nurse. I mean, unless you're an influencer and you are a doctor or a nurse, then by all means, get it done. But, you know, you're sharing information that comes from like a source that knows more about this than you do. So the same thing can apply to like anything that's, you know, in social justice. Like I feel a certain way. lots of times you don't even know what to say, but here's something that like can speak for you. And then you share that. And I think that's okay. The staying silent, I think, is what people get really upset about, because they're like, if you're the for us or against us. And, you know, I think sometimes people just can't. And I think, you know, I'm a big proponent of forgiving people and giving people like grace. You know, people are so upset, like, this person didn't post about X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, for all you know, like, somebody in their house has coronavirus and they don't even know if they're going to make it. Like, why are we adding burdens to people when we don't know what's going on in everyone's life? So, you know, I think there's some responsibility to use your platform for good. But I'm not going to hold, you know, some influencer with 50,000 followers accountable for, like, you know, 200 plus years of like racial injustice, like, because you didn't say something, like, now my kid's future out the window. Like, you gotta be realistic. And I think, you know, so many people just don't have any control. Like, we don't have control over coronavirus. We have control over like so many of these social justice things that yelling at people and canceling people feels like an appropriate outlet for people's rage. And, you know, I think having an outlet is great. You definitely need to be able to let it out because it's poisonous, but to hold all that in. But we have to be very careful who we decide to target, especially when you're an influencer, because one influencer can like do a lot of damage because you have such a big platform. And I think, you know, you have to be responsible. That's what it comes down to. Influencers always say, we didn't sign up to be role models. We didn't sign up to do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, those things are true. And that's why I don't like Jake Paul and these people. Like, why are we taking life advice from them? They're, you know, they don't know what they're talking about. They're like 25 years old. Get out of here. But, you know, you should know that the people who make you rich listen to you. Yeah. So you should have some sort of respect for that.
And with the platform comes, you know, some sort of privilege, and with that comes responsibility, I think, to, you know, to also use that platform to, you know, shed some light on things that are going on in the world and try and help out. But I think you also have to understand, and I think a lot of influencers, and this is more during COVID, I got, you know, a bunch of reporters reaching out being like, will you speak on, you know, whatever influencer was breaking quarantine rules that week? And that there was a lot of that, you know, and I was like, look, I'm not going to talk about a specific influencer. I will say that, like, I think a lot of influencers are realizing that they are public figures in a way that they didn't understand before. And that they are, like, I don't think they've equated, I get paid $10,000 to post an Instagram post with, there's probably a lot of people that resent that, don't like me, think I'm a joke. And if I slip up, they're looking for a way to take me down. They're waiting to pull me down. You know, you see all these articles, rapturous articles about businesses, about like turmoil in the business. I think about like Away luggage, you know, and Away had years where there wasn't a single negative press story. They had some of the most incredible press that any company could ever want, right? Cover of all these magazines, this and that. It's like, at some point there has to be a negative one. Somebody is going to be like, and when that negative one comes out, people are going to love it, because what better, like, people love to see people in a position of power like fall down.
Oh yeah.
You know?
It's
just a human nature thing.
Yeah, people are haters. I tell my husband this all the time. Like, people just, you know, unless you are doing really well, constantly trying to better yourself, you're just resentful of everyone who is doing that. And I think there's a lot of that, you know, like, even with, like, you know, all these influencers who aren't quarantining, and it's like, let's do a New York Times story calling them out. And even I spoke out against that. I was like, listen, I understand that we want people to quarantine. This is a very serious situation. But, like, what are we gaining from, like, throwing somebody's entire family under the bus? Like, are you going to write an article on, like, Joe Schmo down the street who's, like, going to Florida? No, because she's an influencer. She has a target on her back. And it's like, well, you know, they're going to give their audience bad advice. I'm like, listen, if you were taking medical advice from a fashion influencer, you have bigger problems than coronavirus. I'm sorry. Like, your whole life is questionable. You know, they're not doctors. Like, well, I wouldn't take, you know, it's just like, get out of here. It's this, I almost think it's like insulting to the audience, I would say.
Yeah.
Like, you think these people, like the audience of influencers are so stupid that just because an influencer says like walk off a cliff, they're all gonna walk. Now, for some people, that is true of their audiences, you know, they'll follow them to the ends of the earth. But I just think like, you know, there people are always trying to paint that narrative on like influencers that like, you know, influencers are not very smart. Influencers don't particularly work hard. And I just look, I'm like, we don't say that about actors. We don't say, you know, actors, like, what do you do? Pretend to be somebody else all day? Amazing. Right. You know, like athletes, it's like, what do you do? Play the same sports I was playing in elementary school? So hard. You know, we don't do that because these people have, you know, if you're getting paid $10,000 a post, you're an elite influencer. You're at the top of an industry. And I don't know why, just because that it revolves fashion, beauty, or something like that, why it's okay to like demean someone who's risen to the top of a very competitive industry. I just think that's so strange. I think it's, you know, I think if all influencers were men, we wouldn't have this problem. Like, if you look in gaming, sure, some people are like, oh, all they do is play video games all day. But like other people are like, wow, I wish I got paid to play video games all day. It's like, well, she gets paid all day to put on makeup. How is that any different? Yeah. You know?
I mean, the way that press talks about like Ninja versus the way they talk about a big beauty influencer is totally different. And I think I totally agree. I've been saying for years, I'm like, men run advertising. Every CMO is a man, essentially, probably a white man. I would say 99% of our clients are women, like that work in influencer marketing. And I think 75% of the money that we spend goes to women. And I think that the men who are in power, one, aren't following these influencers, don't understand their power, you know, and they just like disrespect it. And they're just like, it's silly. It's putting makeup on in front of a camera. It's not a real thing. And they disrespect it. And and then I think there's this other, like, I mean, you worked in traditional media, and I think a lot of influencers who have these platforms maybe 15, 20 years ago would have gone and tried to work at Hearst. But Hearst said for decades, I don't actually want you because, you know, the way you look, whatever it might be, if you're not, you know, 5'11", 110 pounds and wear sample size, like, I'm not interested in talking about you. And so then all these platforms can, you know, spread. And then, like, what influencers are doing does, you know, it doesn't hurt the New York Times, but it does hurt Cosmo, you know? Right.
Yeah, it's very, you know, working at Hearst was very interesting because I was the first head of influencer marketing. It was kind of like every editor booked their own influencers, but they quickly realized, like, oh, this is like its own job, you know, and just keeping with, like, one editor would be working on a story and book an influencer for like one, you know, lotion, and then somebody else would book that same influencer for a competing lotion, and like no one's talking to each other. So you quickly learn, like, you know, you've got to apply rules to how this works and how long people have to wait before they can promote another brand, and, you know, building out all that structure. But there was always this sense of, well, these are just people at home in a basement. Yeah. And I'm like, and I would always, people would get so mad at me. They'd be like, oh God, here's Brittany. She's going to come defending the influencers again. And I'm like, listen, you are on, and this applied, I would talk to my friends who worked at other major brands. You know, I'd say, you have like a team of 30 people. You guys have 300,000 followers and like the worst engagement I've ever seen. This person in a basement has 1 million and people do whatever she says. Like, and she's by herself. It's her and like her husband. So one of you is doing a really bad job. Like, I don't want to say which one of you it is, but somebody has figured this out, you know. And I think for a long time, so much of this is, I remember when social media first became a thing, and I was telling people you need a Facebook page, and everyone was like, who's going to go to my Facebook page instead of my website? And it was just like, so just when influencers came around, I was like, this is deja vu. And it was crazy because it was the same people. I'm like, did you not learn your lesson from Facebook and Twitter and like knowing you need all these things? This is the same thing. Like these influencers are going to talk about you whether you are participating in the conversation or not. Yeah. And they will either get people to buy your product or get people to stay away from it. Like you have to respect the authority. Like you've got to do it. And I think, it's new. People don't want to because then they're like, well, what about my job? Like I'm a writer, I'm an editor. Am I not going to be important? And it's like, no. Unless you are like doing investigative journalism, which influencers are not doing. No. Unless you're doing like deep dive stories, like if you're just going to come and write like 10 shades of pink for fall or whatever it is, an influencer can do that too, and she got more followers than you. Yeah. So if I'm a brand, like I could hire you or this girl, so it's threatening a whole industry of people who don't know what they're going to do. And I think it's funny because I looked a lot of the editors who across all platforms, Refinery, Timing, all these different places who were like influencers. So many of them are influencers now. Of course. And I'm like, you learned that you could just live a fabulous life and make the same amount of money you make at your media job. Right. Welcome to the other side, And so I think a lot of it was just, I don't know if I can do that, so I'm going to be angry about it. And then when they tried it and realized they could do it, they're like, this is amazing. I could totally see why people are doing this. And it's like, don't be a hater. Like just see what it's about. If it's not for you, fine. If it is, then come and hang out. But it's just hilarious. I just look at all these people and I'm like, look at all these. I know last 2 years ago, you were so anti-influencer. Look at you at 100,000 followers in your Spawn Con. Yeah.
Love it. As we kind of near the end of this episode, I'd love to talk about, what we're planning to do together at Fohr. We started talking in early June, when there was a conversation happening around Fohr and pay and with Black creators. And, you reached out and you're like, hi.
I know. I think I was like, hi, James, it's me. How you doing? I think it's so crazy because it's, so many things bubble under the surface for a long time. Mm-hmm. And everything's always like a perfect storm. So like, creators have not been not getting paid and brands have been trying to get them to do stuff for product forever, but like it's bubbling. Yep. There's been, pay disparities between Black and white creators, between straight size and plus size, between, all sorts of things. But now it's bubbling. Like everything is like, oh no, this is the time and I'm going to talk about my thing too. And so I think, these are conversations that they're overdue, but it's hard. And I think when I saw the conversation happening around Fohr, one, as someone who's also a founder, I understand how difficult it is to please everyone involved. And I would not trade places with you ever because you've got to please influencers, you've got to please brands, you've got investors, you've got like a whole bunch of people who are like, James, what about me? And it's a difficult thing to keep all of those things in check, especially when I think influencers don't realize this. And I think so much of the problems we see influencers having is a lot of them have learned a lot about their niche, what works for their audience, but they have neglected to learn about the business of influencer marketing. And that's where so much of the information comes in. This whole like, Black influencers get paid less than white influencers. And it's like, at Carbon August, I work with a lot of influencers. I see a lot of contracts. I know what a lot of people are thinking about asking for. We do so much of that work. And so much of it is, a lot of influencers just don't ask for more money. Mm-hmm. And I think, there's so many layers there because for Black influencers, and this also still applies to influencers in general, but probably more to Black influencers because there are less of them. They're less attractive, to a lot of brands and all sorts of things that don't make any sense because like the Black buying power is trillions of dollars. We spend a lot of money on things, more disproportionately more than everybody else, but that's another story. But it's this brand reached out to me, they gave me this offer, it's so much lower than what I would take, but like, what if they never reach out to me again? Like, what if I'm going to blow my shot?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, not being able to have that confidence of, oh yeah, they came to me because I'm the best and I'm going to ask for it and they're going to give it to me. That's what you need to make a lot of money as an influencer. It's like the brand can smell weakness, you know, and any sort of that lack of confidence, regardless of your race, gender, age, the brand's going to pick up on that, because what's best for influencers is not what's best for brands. Influencers want to get paid the most for doing the least, and brands want the most and want to pay the least. It's just, they're not on the same page. Sure, there's fair, but like a brand's job is not to make sure you get paid fairly. A brand's job is to make sure maybe you get what you asked for. And so that's one of the things that really inspired me to write the book, is because I had reached out to an influencer. I had, I think, $10,000 to give her. I was casting for a campaign. I had 3 YouTubers. I had $10,000 for each of them. I think I had like an Asian influencer, a Black influencer, and a white influencer, because I've always tried to like give people the United Colors of Benetton. So, you know, the white influencer was like, I asked them, how much do you want? The white influencer was like, I want $10,000. I was like, okay, fine. That's how much I thought she was worth. Great. Yeah. The Black influencer asked me for $1,500 with like a question mark. Like, is that okay? And it was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, so, you know, when you look at like these Instagrams where people are comparing, you know, how much they're getting paid, it's like, you can't do that, because I'm not racist. I'm not trying to lowball anybody. I'm sitting here with a ton of money and all you have to do is ask for it. People don't ask. They're not confident enough to ask. So when we were talking about like all these things I've learned, you know, at Carbon, how can we bring those to fore and like really help your community? So much of it is, you guys have great tech. So helping influencers put together great packages so that they can feel like they're putting their best foot forward. It's just like going into an interview. You get your hair blown out, you do your makeup, you buy new clothes, you get your nails done. You've got to like bring it when you come. So that's like the first step. Second step, you have to know what the heck you're talking about. You know, you research a company, you've got to know what they're trying to do in the market. You've got to know like what you're worth. And that's influencers' biggest problem. They have no idea how much they're worth. Yeah. And deciding how much you're worth based on how much somebody else said they're worth, it's ridiculous. You guys are not the same. You might not have the same demographic, engagement rate, quality of content, years in the game, area of expertise. Like the list just goes on and on and on about like why 2 influencers who on the surface look the same are worth completely different amounts. And I think influencers just know what they do. They don't know what's happening on the other end. And so the education piece is huge, and we're going to do a lot of that. And then I think, you know, like the last thing is influencers definitely need like support. Yep. They need to feel like, I have questions, I have a grievance, I need something, like who's here to help me? And for you, you know, we talked about this, like you started for to be like, this could be a cool way for like people to make some money. Hey, this is great, you know? And like, I think with all like ideas, like, and every influencer should be able to relate to, you know, the position you find yourself in. Is lots of influencers started this, like, this could be pretty cool. Maybe this will turn into something. And now like 8 years later, they've got 1 million followers. They've got a shoe line. They've got a this line. Like there's really no way to prepare for that sort of thing, because we're all in this industry doing something that nobody before us has done. There isn't a group of people to look ahead to. We are those people. It's everybody coming behind us now who's like, oh, let me read this book. Let me join this platform. Let me join this agency. Like we've literally paved the way for everybody who's coming after us. So to expect us to be like perfect and have all the answers and not give people, again, the grace to like adjust, understand that things move really fast. And like, you could see an issue, be like, we really should address that. But like, you have employees to feed, you have rent to pay. Like sometimes other things are more important than a problem you really want to solve. And so I think you and I, you know, you had the foresight to be like, somebody's got to help me do this, because you can't devote all your time to it. You have to run an entire business, you know. There are no opportunities if you don't get to do your job. Right. And so this is a very vital part, you know, of the Fohr community. You want them to be happy, healthy, ready to like accept offers, feel good about them, do all this, but like with what time in the day? Yeah. Yeah. Where are you going to do that? So, that's what we're going to do together. Is I've spent the last 2 years figuring out how to help influencers do that. And it's like, James, I already thought about all of this stuff. So let me just bring this stuff to you. Let's get it out to your community. And then everyone can feel really good. They can feel like they're learning something, understand the way the business works. And then they can get that confidence. Because while there are some brands who I'm sure are like, let's play the Black creators less, I'm sure it happens. I've never actually seen it. But of course, that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I'm sure somewhere it's happening. I don't think that's the largest piece of the problem. I think the largest piece of the problem is influencers aren't asking for enough, And some of these people, if a brand is willing to pay you $10,000 and you only ask for $1,500, a lot went wrong there. And that's, I think, the gap. Influencers need to be confident and they need to be smart. Overpricing is not smart either. Like, that's crazy. You can't just throw out crazy numbers because your friend said you could get this. So like, what about that? Because you look ridiculous. Sometimes I'm like, you are not worth that much. I don't know who told you, but you need new friends. So it's understanding why a brand would be hiring you and what those individual pieces are worth. And having a strong number that you can convey, with confidence. And if you think something is not fair, you're willing to walk away, which every influencer will do that. People will just take a little bit and then be angry about it. It's like, you don't have to take that job. You've got to be confident in like, well, the next one will be right. Or there is a brand that will pay my fee and I'm willing to be open to those opportunities, look for them, do all sorts of things to like keep my revenue streams flowing. But it can't, if you're a business owner, which influencers are, you've got to take some responsibility for the fact that you're not getting paid enough. Right. You've got to ask for more money. And it's the same thing in like the workplace. Everything with women, like parity is ask for more money, do your research, find out how much you should be making, and then go for it. And I don't see why that shouldn't apply to influencers as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, over the last few years, I was just looking back to some stats from 2016 and the platform was 9,000 influencers and it's 110,000 or something now. And I think that kind of happened without us focusing on it. I mean, that just naturally, organically happened, which is awesome. But we haven't had anyone, to help us guide and take care of that community. And I think I'm so excited to see what that looks like and to start rolling that out. And I think the first thing we're going to do is have a Facebook group that you'll be moderating. And we'll put a link under this video where you can sign up for that. But, a big part of this is that we didn't have a good way at scale to listen to our community, and I hope that this group can be a way for us to, roll out education and have those conversations, but also to just do a better job of listening and making sure that people are feeling heard, and that if they have issues or they're confused about something or concerns, that we can actually address those with technology or education or just a straight answer. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm sure everyone else is going to be equally excited, and thank you for your time today. That went by very quickly. And I'm looking forward to the work.
Yeah, we're going to have a great time. It's going to be amazing. I'm super excited.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Brittany.
Thanks, James.